welcome to another episode of A San Francisco Conservative, the new podcast series featuring yours truly, me, Tom Martin. I'm a lifelong journalist. I produce stories for ABC News, CBS News, CNN. I love meeting interesting people and asking thought-provoking questions, and that's exactly what I do here. And I would love for you to meet my friend and the very successful, talented author, David Parker. David is the author of two great books, A San Francisco Conservative, which gives this series its title, and also Income and Wealth. And David joins us from San Francisco. Hey, David, how are you today?
Fine, Tom. That's nice to see you.
Good to see you. Good to see you. So it's funny. I was thinking about, every one of these conversations sort of opens my eyes to something new, I will say, which I love. And I was thinking that perhaps the title of this week's episode might be Defying Conventional Wisdom. I know that many times you talk to us about inflation, about the coming recession, and so on, and about a lot of people seem to be, we're recording this around the time of heading into the new year. A lot of people seem to be running around acting like, Chicken Little, the sky is falling. But you don't seem really stressed or nervous or worried. How do you explain that?
I have a poster in my room of Alfred E. Newman. Me worry?
Mad Magazine, I remember.
Mad Magazine, my kids gave it to me because how come you never worry about anything? Because I'm been through so many recessions. I've seen the economy go up and go down. I feel very comfortable with the economy. And when you see every economist predicting we're going to have a recession, interest rates are high and prices are rising. Every economist is saying that. You can be sure, you can bet on it that we will not have a recession. Every recession in the past, especially the 2008 financial crisis, but the dot-com before that and the S&L crisis before that, no economists predicted them, or a handful. So if they don't predict recessions, but now they're all united in predicting one, it's obvious it's not going to happen. Economists do not have their thumb on the pulse of the economy. They have their thumb on a book, and they're talking to students. So they're wrong. What I call unconventional thinking, I guess, is inflation. People are anxious, and that's why the Fed raised interest rates a little bit. I don't use that word inflation, although it's probably the most convenient word to use. 2 years of COVID, consumers haven't been spending money. They haven't been getting on an airplane and going to hotels and renting a car and going out to restaurants. They've been at home. They've been buying top ramen soup for 19 cents and feed the whole family of 4. People have acquired some money. They're sitting on money. And we know the supply chain is backed up. China keeps closing its factories. And even without that, in fact, supply is backed up. Well, both of those push price up. But that won't last forever. Consumers are about to, it's Christmas time. They're going to go blow all their money really quickly now, and run up their credit card bills real quick. And supply is going to ease up. And the Fed will, if that happens, the Fed's going to start lowering interest rates. So I'm not worried about it.
Yeah. It's funny, as I've confessed on other episodes, I get most of my news these days from CNN, and they'll have economic analysts on, and they'll say, well, there is a coming recession, and we are experiencing inflation. There is an interesting, robust job creation picture right now, and certain factors that you don't usually see during a recession. So I'm thinking, well, maybe there's not a recession. So, yeah.
Yeah, very good point, because every time I read the paper talking about inflation recession, usually the column right next to it says, boy, the job market is heating up. We can't find employees. This very good. That I've noticed that conflict in every issue of the paper whenever they're talking about like that. That's another, yeah.
And perhaps one reason you may like Alfred E. Newman, saying what you weren't worried is, I know you've told me before, you see this actually as a time of opportunity, right?
Correct. Professional investment is fully financed investment. That's a professional investor. It's an expression of other people's money, I suppose, is one way. But whenever you have a recession, prices go down, including for example, homes. So the mortgage on a home might be the value of the home, and the bank is afraid of a foreclosure, and they don't want that because they're audited by the Federal Reserve all the time, or the Treasury Department. And if they show foreclosures, it means they're not doing their homework, and they will force them to increase their reserve requirements, and they can't loan money because they have to keep a higher and higher reserve. So they don't want a foreclosure. Just go to the bank and say, well, the mortgage on this property here that I'm looking at is the value. Just give it to me. And the bank might say, yeah, if you can hold it, you're going to show you have some savings and that you're not going to give it back right away because you can't hold it. And that's a great opportunity. That's a leveraged buyout, a pure leveraged buyout. That's what I think about as an investor. So there's an opportunity always.
Yeah. I have a follow-up question to that. I just want to take 1 minute to remind everyone, if you're joining us midstream here, this is a San Francisco Conservative, the new podcast series featuring yours truly, Tom Martin, journalist asking questions, and David Parker, author of Income and Wealth and a San Francisco Conservative, 2 excellent books, joining us from San Francisco. And so, David, that scenario that you just described as far as going into a bank saying, I'll take that worry, speaking of worries, I'll take that worry off your hands. I know that I can make the payments and so on. Is there any other advice that you have for people? It's funny, I love great quotations, and one of my favorites is from Henry Ford. He had a few different great quotations, of course, but I think he said, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. So if you have that preconception, we're in a recession, it's terrible, the sky is falling, you're not positioning yourself very well. That's not a very empowering mindset. But do you have any advice for people, for those of us heading into a new year, that maybe we could look at things a little bit differently in terms of our finances?
Yes, I do. And it's related. Why would the bank give you the property for nothing if they think maybe you're going to give it right back to them because you're not going to find a tenant for it if it's real estate, and they won't give it to you unless they know you can hold it. Well, that means you have cash in the bank if you can hold it. That's all, pure and simple. So every professional investor stockpiles great quantities of cash because you never know. You don't use it for investment, but you use it to deal from a position of strength. So Income and Wealth, my book gives an example of how an employee at McDonald's on minimum wage becomes financially independent in 10 years and doesn't have to worry about going to work ever again. But you have to make a little effort. You save half your salary, your gross salary. You put it away and you buy the house next door or any income producing asset with leverage, one a year for 10 years. The house next door, the corner grocery, a fleet of trucks, whatever you're comfortable with it. Not stocks because they don't have income and they don't let you buy it with much leverage. You have to pay mostly cash. That doesn't work. But where do you get the cash? You really have to save it. And if you have debt, consumer debt, don't pay that debt. Get that lender to make a loan out of it, or you put that money away get a roommate. Live 2 families in a home. Most people are living way over their means. Start cutting back, start working more. Don't commute, live around the corner and work 2 extra hours a day at time and a half. San Francisco minimum wage is $15 an hour. All of a sudden, that's $22.50 an hour times 2 hours is $45 a day all throughout the year. You just start thinking about it. There's no end.
Mhm.
So you got to start saving. That's the
You're
hard part.
and you're not. I take it you're not necessarily saying you're going to be living like that for the rest of your life. You're talking about achieving a very important goal. You're talking about achieving financial independence.
Correct. Everybody has their plan A. They wanted to be an artist or a school teacher or open a restaurant. And everybody knows the odds are bad. So what? You're doing what you want to do. And you don't care if you're financially independent. So that's why one great reason. It frees you in every way. You be happy, a happy person.
And it's interesting. I want to go back to. I think it's. Well, maybe funny is not the right word, but I remember, when I was maybe 10 or 12 years old, Sesame Street popped up and they said, "Today is brought to you by the letter W." We keep going back to the word worry. So people are worried about various things. And perhaps during these times of worry, a lot of people are very comfortable handing all of their challenges over to politicians. But I remember, which I know you've told us how disastrous that can be, but I remember you've told us about, say, the writer Alexis de Tocqueville around the time of the founding of our country, saying one of the qualities that he really liked was that sense of personal responsibility, that Americans took on personal responsibility. Is that something that we should think about heading into the new year?
Yes. We flipped the coin from the founding fathers and Alex de Tocqueville. The founding fathers, they created a nation of maximum individual liberty. That was their thought in a nutshell. The other side of that coin is maximum individual responsibility, because you can't turn to the government. The government is almost not there. It was originally designed to be really small. And de Tocqueville says America's going to go far because the citizens are so responsible. Nothing like it in Europe. People reading the newspaper in log cabins in Kentucky, and people talking international affairs. That doesn't exist in Europe. It says get rid of slavery, then you're on your way. And then we flipped the coin. All of a sudden, 1933, we decided government can be a force for good. Freedom doesn't mean freedom from government, which our founding fathers thought. They come from Europe. They know what government is, and aristocracy is, and privilege is, and class. They know what that is, and they rejected it. And all of a sudden, no. Freedom means freedom with government. And we have all the programs of Franklin Delano Roosevelt. He campaigned in 32 when the Depression was still on, 29 to 32, and the Depression was over at the beginning of 33. But that's when his term of office began. He said, "Oh no, I'm going to put all those programs into place," but the Depression was over. And he reversed the Depression. And we've made this nation now a nation of very dependent people who really look to the government to bail them out, and also just it's integral to their life. Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid and public ownership of the schools.
Yeah, I think maybe I forget if it was Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren or someone else who came up with the idea college education should be free. Joe Biden is trying to make that happen, but the courts are popping up saying, "Hey, wait a minute, these loans need to be repaid, and it's not you don't have that power." Basically, I guess.
In 1933, Roosevelt says, "Hear them out. Well, here's the legislation I want." The Supreme Court for 33, 34, I think in 35, vetoed everything. They said absolutely unconstitutional. There's nothing in the vision of the founding fathers. There's nothing in the Constitution that says the government can just step into our lives and make us a little dependent. That's what dictators do. They get the population dependent on them. That's what Bismarck did. That's what Mussolini and Hitler did. They gave the citizens everything: unemployment insurance, health care, pension, high wages, everything, cultural access so they can go to fine restaurants and fine theater. a very humanitarian thing. That's what they do in Cuba. Cubans have everything, psychological freedom from having to worry about a job. In exchange, if you're in Cuba, you can't leave the country, and you never get to vote for anybody who's in office. That's what Bismarck figured out. Mussolini and Hitler figured that out. They're in power for life, and the citizens will do what we tell them to do. And they created what's called the corporate state. So we are becoming a European socialist nation. Bernie Sanders is saying that's correct. Just look at Denmark, look at Sweden. And both those countries, their ambassadors came back and yelled at him, don't look at us. We're dismantling that completely. Mistake. Don't look at us.
Interesting. So, well, we've talked about being aware that there are opportunities available to us. We've talked about the importance of personal responsibility. As we close this conversation, is there anything else that you'd like to see people be a little bit more aware of or take to heart in the new year?
Well, if you have a program of saving, whatever program you have to stick to it. It's related to sticking to principle. The Constitution is one page. One page. You can go to Washington, D.C. It's on an art easel in one of the Capitol buildings, and you can look at it. Put your hands behind your back and lean over like in an art gallery and read it. One page. And if you can't stick to principle, you can't stick to the 10 Commandments or the Golden Rule or the Constitution or to a little economic plan, you have nothing and you are nothing.
Sort of sounds like
a tough line, but that's
for chaos.
I'm a San Francisco conservative,
Yes,
not
sir.
that conservative. When it comes to the economy, I'm very conservative.
Absolutely. Well, I can see the wisdom there. So, well, thank you for today. I again learned a lot. I think about things in a little bit different, new way now, heading into the new year. I'm very grateful for that. And I want to remind our viewers and our listeners, be sure to pick up copies of David's books, Income and Wealth, and a San Francisco Conservative. You can do that by visiting his website, davidparkeressays.com. You'll also find some episodes of this podcast that you may not have seen right there on David's website. Tell your friends to tune in and catch our podcast here. And you can also pick up copies of his books, of course, through Amazon. Any last words, David?
Yeah, I have two last words. You've asked me this question before, and I give examples throughout history. I love 5th century Athens. I love 1st century Rome and 18th century Age of Enlightenment. And when you read those great authors, you wonder what century. They sound like us. They talk like us. And they're talking about the same things. So it's a good perspective to read what they say. And they were kind of serious, and they were talking about responsibility. And then I realized that my examples in my works are all from business or from my experience as a jazz musician, from responding on the spot, and from my experience teaching and responding on the spot. So my examples are not those of from academia. I'm not talking to students, or it's not by a student or by a teacher. It's by a person whose thumb is on the pulse of the economy. So my examples are interesting.
Absolutely. No, I've learned a lot from both books. They're excellent. So great. Well, great to see you. I look forward to our next conversation.
Thank you. I'll be back.
Okay.